you are a Clausewitzian expert, sir. Can you first tell us what that means, and then does it still apply in this strange new world?
Yes, he said it to make it clear that war is not just a game. It's not something which takes place in a kind of vacuum governed by its own laws. That wars are fought for purposes, and they are political purposes, and the political objective has got to impregnate the whole of the conduct of war. Now, the difference is that when he wrote at the beginning of the 19th century, he was thinking about war between states. Now we have got war within states. And I'm afraid it is perfectly true that if one looks at the former Yugoslavia, war is being conducted there as politics continued by other means. The politics of the individual separate ethnic groups attempting to assert their independence, extend their range, and assert their individuality, and using force to do it. So the short answer is yes. What Clausewitz wrote is still valid.
Is it still valid in terms of war between states in an era of nuclear weapons? You have written that war is much less likely in the modern circumstance because the weapons have become so horrific.
Certainly war between states armed with nuclear weapons is less likely because neither side sees any political advantage to be gained from a conflict in which they're likely to suffer at least as much as their adversary. But other types of war between lesser armed states, as between Iraq and Iran, or between Iraq and the coalition put together 5 years ago to keep Saddam at bay, is still happens, and I'm afraid it's likely to continue to happen.
Why can't we put a coalition together to do something about Bosnia?
I think very largely because the whole Bosnian situation is infinitely more complicated than that in the Gulf. The Gulf was a wonderful, simple situation. In the first place, there was a single adversary, a bad guy, straight out of central casting, Saddam Hussein. You only had to see him on the box to know that he was bad. Secondly, there was an absolutely straightforward infringement of international law with his invasion of Kuwait. And thirdly, the oil resources of the Western world were at risk. Now put that together and you have got a full flush.
Plus a program to build nuclear weapons, just as an added kicker.
Yes, I mean,
right?
you couldn't have a better scenario. Bosnia is such a mess. It is by no means clear which side is right. They all have got very good cases. The whole conflict escalated suddenly from low-level confrontation. By the time it was realized that we had got a war on our hands, and by us I mean the international community, it was by no means clear what ought to be done about it, and there were totally different views between the Europeans, the Americans, and the Americans and the Russians. We got dragged into it for two reasons. First, a general sense on the part of the international community that there is an obligation on our part when one does see suffering and tensions and death, that we should intervene to do something about it. Secondly, a fear, which I personally think was greatly exaggerated, that this was going to be a forest fire that would spread indefinitely unless we did something about it. Now, my own feeling is that if we had left it entirely alone, we would have reached within possibly 6 months, certainly a year, the conclusion which we are now reaching today. That is to say, a war which is settled on the spot within the theatre, in accordance with the balance of power, with the strongest guys who aren't necessarily ever the nicest guys winning.
If Clausewitz and political warfare still obtains in civil situations within a nation, and as you say, between nations because of the, or between big nations in any event, because of the threat of nuclear weapons, the war is less likely than ever. What is, is the game worth the candle? What are we Americans and we as an international modern industrial democratic alliance, what are we trying to accomplish?
What we in the West are trying to accomplish is the continuation of a peace which is very much to our advantage. We are the winners in a succession of wars. We have established a global dominance which suits us very well, which enables our economy to flourish, which enhances the lifestyles of our people, and what we want is to preserve that. That means we're in favor of peace, we're in favor of the status quo. There are, however, always going to be people in the world who see themselves as losers, who don't like the status quo, and who try to disrupt it. If they have no other means, they will try to disrupt it by force.
Is it merely status quo, or is it in our best interest that this way of life that you describe, dealing with democracy and markets and individualism, isn't it in our best interest that philosophy be extended as well as maintained?
It is in the general interest that it should be extended so far as it can be extended. I think there's a certain optimistic feeling that ultimately the whole world will be like us, will think like us, that the Anglo-Saxon type democracy is going to be the answer for everybody, irrespective of their race or culture. That is something that I myself do not necessarily believe. I think cultures are too diverse. I don't think that Western-type democracy goes down necessarily in Islamic states. I don't think it goes down necessarily in Confucian states. All of them have got their own ways of doing things. What matters is that we should have a global system in which they all, whatever their philosophy, feel comfortable and are comfortable with one another.
Well,